and you're going to hate me for this.
There's something that we do as writers that has started driving me crazy, and I have been guilty of it in the past as well, but I've come to a realization, and I'm going to politely ask all authors to stop doing this. Stop saying that writers are readers too.
Well, clearly that's not going to happen.
I hear writers screaming this all the time, and it's almost always in response to some discussion about how writers need to stay out of reader spaces. Readers saying that they don't want authors on Goodreads. They don't want authors coming at them for bad reviews. And the readers will say, this is not a writer space, this is a reader space. And the writers will say, writers are readers too.
Well, we are.
And sure, that's true. Sort of. Most writers read a lot, or, at least they should. But when you say I'm a reader in that context, in that conversation, in that space, well,
it's just not true.
And I think it's really important for writers to understand this, and not just because readers want us to.
I say that's a pretty good reason.
It's important to understand because, you know what, we're going to get back to that. First, I want to tell you a little story. I used to work in the theater. I was a theater person. I was in technical theater. I was a lighting designer. I was in audio a little bit. I did some directing, some production management. And I used to be the technical director and stage manager for this little 800-seat theater. And one night I was at a fancy dinner. It was some kind of like celebration for the theater. And at my table, it was me, my wife, one of the theater's board members, and his wife. And she was a lawyer, and that's important. We were all talking about theater, and she asked me if I had been to London. And I said, no, I've never been to London. I've always wanted to go, but I haven't been. And she said,
oh, Neil, you've got to go to London. London is amazing for theater. Oh, the theaters are beautiful, and there's so much interesting production work, and so many shows start there before they even come to the U.S. And yeah, you've got to go to London.
And I said, Maureen, her name was Maureen. I said, Maureen, do you watch Law and Order? And she said,
no, I don't watch Law and Order.
I said, why? It's a great show. It's got great writing on it, good actors. It's, topical and timely. Why don't you watch that? And she said,
I'm a lawyer. All I do all day is do lawyer stuff. I'm in court. I'm in the law office. I'm doing law all day. I don't want to come home at the end of the night and watch.
See, she couldn't interact with Law and Order as just a relaxing TV show that was fun and interesting and compelling because she would be looking at it through the eyes of a lawyer. And I, for the longest time, could not interact with theater the way an audience member does, the way a patron of the arts does, because I had a different connection to the medium. Authors, we are the same. We are not readers the way that readers are readers. We have a different connection with the medium and with the art form, and therefore we do not experience it the same way that someone who is just an avid reader does. So when they're talking about reader spaces, that's what they're talking about. It doesn't mean that we can't also read. It just means that we're not the same. We're not the same as someone who categorizes themselves as a reader. And this is important because, of course, marketing. See, I saw a post on either Threads or Blue Sky recently. I can't remember which one, but it was talking about how they felt the problem with being an indie author, and this was a reader, not a writer, was that it was one big circle jerk. Now, that's not true mostly, but it is a little bit. And I'll tell you why, because when we get on social media platforms, which is the primary way that most of us are marketing our books, right? We are not buying ads in newspapers. We are not running radio or TV commercials. We are marketing on some kind of social media, whether it's Facebook, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TikTok, whether it's Threads, whether it's Blue Sky, whether it's Instagram, whether it's, I don't know. What did I miss?
Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest.
That's our primary place where we market. But when we get on those platforms and start building our communities, most of us, there are exceptions, I know you're out there, don't come at me, but most of us, what we end up doing is building a community of writers.
I'm a writer.
I'm a writer.
I'm a writer.
Yeah, I'm a writer too.
And of course, that makes sense. We want that kind of moral support, that camaraderie with other writers. But then when we go to market our book, our entire audience, or a majority of our audience, is other writers, not readers. And yes, like we said, it's not that the other authors don't read, and it's not that they won't buy our books to either support us or just because they like our books. But it's such a small sliver of what we're trying to reach.
Such emotion over something so small.
It's why it's so difficult to build momentum, because you're not talking to the people that you need to get to. What we should have all done is, when we started our social media accounts, we should have just followed readers and just interacted with readers. That way, when it came time to promote our books, we had an audience of readers. But don't cry over spilt milk, because there's another bigger problem. And that is that the readers that we're talking about in this conversation so far are the people who go on social media to talk about reading and talk about the books they're reading and talk about what kinds of books they read and the genres they read and hyper focus on specific genres. But the thing is that those people that make their identity around reading and being readers and being bookish, that's still a tiny, tiny sliver of the people that read books. The truth of the matter is, most people that read don't really talk about reading. If you ask them to identify themselves, they wouldn't say, oh, I'm a reader or I'm bookish. They'd say, oh, I'm an engineer. Oh, I like to play golf. I work in the garden. And if you ask them, they'd say, oh, yeah, I like to read. I read this really great book last month. But it's not like in the front of their head. It's not their entire identity. But that's the vast majority of readers. And they're not online looking at Book Talk or Bookstagram. They're not on Book Sky. They don't follow am reading hashtags. They just have a book that they're reading, usually from the library or maybe one they picked up at the airport. These are the people that we have to reach, and we're not going to reach them in writing communities or reader communities. We're going to reach them where their other interests are, where their primary interests are. And that gets super, super tricky. If you're writing a historical drama, how do you reach the guy that happens to read historical dramas, but also mostly focuses on playing chess? How do you find the sci-fi fan whose primary identity is being a car mechanic? Look, I'm not coming on here trying to say I have the silver bullet, but one thing I learned recently is that marketing is about figuring out who your ideal reader is. Not in a general sense, like create a specific person, give them a name. What is your primary demographic look like? And what are they interested in? And where are you going to find them? Because that's where you need to go. This was long, and this was ranty, and this was, all over the place. But I do think it's important. I think it's important that we remember, one, writers are not readers the way that the reader community is talking about being a reader, because we interact with the medium and the art form differently. Two, marketing to your author community is very limiting. Three, the reading community that identifies as the reading community is smaller than you think it is. And four, your primary audience is going to be people who want to read a book on the train, read a book before they're falling asleep at night, read a book on the beach on vacation, but that's not their identity. I think if we just kind of keep this in mind, it'll help us as we move forward in designing our marketing plans, designing our marketing schemes. Yeah. So I have 2 books, Dark White and Malcolm Karma Cold Turkey, and you can find them everywhere that you find books. All right, go out, go write something.